For 44 years, the brutal murder of Dorothy "Dottie" Silsel remained a chilling mystery, until a groundbreaking DNA discovery unraveled the truth. Kent, Washington. February 1980. A Boeing employee named Dorothy Silsel is found dead inside her apartment. The scene is disturbing. She's been sexually assaulted, strangled, and beaten. No forced entry. No clear motive. No suspect. At the time, the case stunned the quiet suburban neighborhood. Dorothy was 30 years old. She worked 2 jobs. Lived alone. Kept to herself. And then, without warning, she was gone. Police worked around the clock, chasing leads, questioning neighbors, following every possible thread. But nothing stuck. The killer vanished without a trace. And as the weeks turned into months, and months into years, her case slowly faded into the cold files. No one could have imagined it would take more than 4 decades, 2 generations of detectives, and a revolutionary breakthrough in forensic genealogy to finally give Dorothy the justice she deserved. But that's exactly what happened. And it all started with a single drop of DNA. Dorothy "Dottie" Silsel was 30 years old when her life was taken. She was the kind of person who never stopped moving, working full-time at Boeing and pulling evening shifts at Gaetano's Pizza in Kent, Washington. Friends and co-workers described her as reliable, quiet, independent. She didn't cause trouble, and she never expected it to come looking for her. She wasn't famous. She wasn't flashy. She was like millions of other women, trying to make ends meet, doing the best she could. She worked hard. 2 jobs. Long hours. Minimal complaints. She took pride in being dependable, and she lived a life of steady rhythm: work, home, repeat. There were no signs of risk. No enemies. Nothing to suggest the violence that would cut her life short. Dottie Silsel was more than a murder victim. She was a woman doing everything right. Until the night someone took that all away. Saturday, February 23, 1980. It was a regular evening for Dorothy "Dottie" Silsel. She finished her shift at Gaetano's Pizza in Kent, Washington, just like she always did. She clocked out, likely tired, possibly thinking about her next shift at Boeing. No one knew it then, but that moment would be the last time anyone saw her alive. She never came in for work on Sunday. Or Monday. And for Dorothy, that wasn't normal. She wasn't the type to miss a shift, especially without calling. Coworkers grew worried. Her family couldn't reach her. And soon, a sense of unease started to build. 2 full days passed. Still no sign of Dottie. No calls. No updates. No answers. What began as quiet concern quickly turned into fear. Something was wrong. And by the time someone knocked on the door of her apartment, it was already too late. By February 26, 1980, the silence was no longer something that could be brushed off. Dorothy Silsel hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. No phone calls. No messages. Nothing. For a woman as dependable as Dottie, that kind of absence sent alarm bells ringing. Her friends and family were done waiting. They called the police. Kent Patrol Officer Bob Burwell was one of the first to respond. Alongside one of Dorothy's concerned co-workers, he made his way to her apartment, located at 25466 106th Avenue Southeast. The door was locked. There was no response inside. But what they would find beyond that door would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Lying on the floor inside her home was Dorothy's body. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been beaten. And she had been murdered. Her apartment showed no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No splintered doorframe. Whoever did this, likely walked in without a struggle. And just like that, a missing persons report turned into a homicide investigation. The autopsy results were grim. The King County Medical Examiner confirmed what detectives already feared. Dorothy "Dottie" Silsel had been murdered in a brutal and personal attack. The official cause of death, asphyxia due to compression of the blood vessels in her neck. She had also suffered blunt force trauma to the head. It wasn't quick. It wasn't clean. It was violent. But in the midst of that horror, there was one small glimmer of hope, evidence. Inside the apartment, investigators collected multiple samples, including a crucial piece, DNA from a bathrobe. It was preserved, labeled, and entered into storage. At the time, DNA technology was still in its infancy. There were no immediate answers. No database to match it against. But detectives had the foresight to hold on to it. And that decision would change everything. Back in 1980, the DNA collected from Dorothy Silsel's apartment was virtually useless by modern standards. Investigators had physical evidence, but no way to decode it. There were no DNA databases. No genetic profiles to compare. The science simply wasn't there yet. So, the case stalled. Year after year. Lead after lead. All dead ends. But that DNA, carefully preserved, waited in silence. Then came 2016. With new breakthroughs in DNA analysis, forensic scientists were able to extract a full genetic profile from the evidence left behind. The unknown assailant was now labeled Individual A. A ghost with a genome. Still nameless. But no longer invisible. Fast forward to March 2022. A forensic genealogist named Misty Gillis took on the case. Using advanced genealogy methods, she built out family trees, traced bloodlines, and sifted through decades of data. She narrowed it down to 11 possible suspects. Among them, 2 brothers. Kurt and Kenneth Kundert. The investigation had heat again. And this time, they were getting close. March 2024. After 44 years, investigators were ready to move in. Kent detectives, working alongside law enforcement agencies in Arkansas and Missouri, began quiet surveillance on 65-year-old Kenneth Kundert, now living in Clinton, Arkansas. They didn't confront him. They didn't ask questions. Instead, they watched and waited. And then, he slipped. Kenneth discarded a cigarette. A small, careless act. But to investigators, it was gold. The cigarette was collected, processed, and tested. The result? A direct DNA match to Individual A. The man who raped and murdered Dorothy Silsel in 1980. On August 20, 2024, authorities made their move. Kenneth Kundert was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The man who once lived just 1,200 feet from Dorothy's apartment had finally been unmasked. After decades of silence, science had spoken. And Kenneth Kundert's secrets were no longer safe. Once the DNA match came through, the pieces began to fall into place. Back in 1980, Kenneth Kundert and his brother lived just 1,200 feet from Dorothy Silsel's apartment. Same complex. Same quiet neighborhood. Close enough to pass each other in the parking lot. Close enough for Kenneth to know her routine, and strike when she was alone. At the time, that proximity had gone unnoticed. No one connected the dots. But in 2024, with a confirmed DNA match and renewed focus, the geography suddenly mattered. Then came the science. The DNA collected from the bathrobe in Dorothy's apartment, preserved for over 4 decades, was a perfect match to the sample pulled from Kenneth's discarded cigarette. It wasn't circumstantial. It wasn't a maybe. It was a forensic bullseye. The man who had escaped suspicion in 1980 was now the center of a case built on cold evidence and modern truth. After his arrest in August 2024, Kenneth Kundert didn't go quietly. Instead of returning to Washington to face the charges, he contested his extradition from Arkansas. The legal maneuver delayed his arraignment, stalling the process just as momentum had returned to the case. For Dorothy's loved ones, it was another painful pause in a journey already stretched over 4 decades. But the justice system pushed forward. When the court finally addressed bail, the decision was clear. Kenneth Kundert's bond was set at $3 million, cash or surety. It was a figure that matched the weight of the crime and the years of silence that followed it. Now, with DNA evidence, proximity to the crime scene, and a renewed investigation, the path to trial was finally in motion. After 44 years, the law had caught up. And the courtroom would soon become the battleground for truth. The case against Kenneth Kundert wasn't cracked by a confession or a tip from the public. It was cracked by science. Specifically, forensic genealogy. This emerging tool has revolutionized the way cold cases are solved. It starts with DNA. Collected from a crime scene, like the sample recovered from Dorothy Silzel's apartment in 1980. Decades ago, that DNA led nowhere. But in the hands of modern forensic genealogists, it became a roadmap. By uploading the profile of the unknown suspect, individual, to public genealogy databases, investigators could begin building family trees. They looked for shared markers, second cousins, distant relatives, any clue that could point to a name. And that's exactly what happened. In 2022, genealogist Misty Gillis identified a web of relatives that narrowed the suspect pool to 11 men. Among them, Kenneth Kundert. This was no guesswork. It was precision. A collaboration between science and persistence that pulled a murderer out of hiding, 44 years after the crime. Forensic genealogy didn't just assist this case. It solved it. As of now, Kenneth Kundert has not yet stood trial for the murder of Dorothy "Dottie" Silzel. He remains in custody, awaiting formal proceedings in Washington state. After decades of silence, and nearly 2 years since his arrest, the case is preparing to enter the courtroom, a place where evidence, timelines, and truth will be laid bare. Where decades of questions may finally be answered. And where Dorothy's loved ones, after 44 long years, might hear the words they've waited a lifetime for. No plea has been publicly entered. No trial date confirmed. But the path forward is clear. The man once known only as Individual A now has a name, a face, and soon, he'll face justice under the law. For Dorothy. For her family. And for a case that refused to be forgotten. After 44 long years, the arrest of Kenneth Kundert marked a turning point, a moment when justice, though delayed, finally took form. For Dorothy Silzel's family, it was a breakthrough they feared might never come. For the Kent community, it was a reminder that time does not erase pain, but it can still deliver truth. The case stood as a cold shadow over the city for decades. Now, with a suspect in custody and a trial approaching, there is at least the beginning of closure. Her friends. Her co-workers. The officers who never gave up. All of them carried the weight of unanswered questions. Now, there's hope that those questions will finally be addressed in court. This case isn't only about one woman's tragic death. It's about the persistence of investigators. The power of DNA. And the unwavering promise that no matter how much time has passed, justice is still possible. Dorothy "Dottie" Silzel was not forgotten. And because of that, her story will finally be heard. What are your thoughts on the resolution of this decades-old case? Do you believe justice is finally within reach for Dorothy Silzel? We'd love to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you why cold cases matter and why the pursuit of truth should never stop, click that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime documentaries. And don't forget to turn on notifications, so you never miss a story that deserves to be told.